You're about to discover why volunteering for one of the test cruises the lines have to run in the United States may not be as good a deal as it sounds. I am Gary Bembridge, and in this episode of Tips for Travellers, I explore 8 things you need to know about the test cruises that all cruise lines are required to run in the United States before they can return to running regular cruises with paying passengers. Plus, I'm going to give you some big watch outs to help you decide if you should volunteer. First off, what exactly are these test cruises and why do lines have to run them? Test cruises are the second stage of a 4-stage process. The US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, requires cruise lines to go through to get approval to resume cruising in and out of US ports. The first stage covers crew safety, building laboratory, COVID-19 testing capability, and putting in place other physical changes onto ships, so things like ventilation, medical center upgrades, and even isolation cabins. So once that's all done and signed off by the CDC, the cruise lines have to run these test cruises to show that they are able to, as the CDC puts it, mitigate the risks of COVID-19 on board its cruise ships. If they pass these test cruises, they can then apply to resume cruising. So these are really, really important. Now, all of the lines have to run these. So for example, Carnival Corporation will be running them for all of their lines that they plan to operate out of US ports. So that's going to include things like Carnival, Princess, Holland America. And then even for lines like Cunard that call into the US ports, because the CDC includes any cruise ship carrying over 250 people entering US waters to have to go through this. Now, although most people have assumed these will be cruises, they may not, in fact, actually be cruises. The CDC itself does not require ships to set sail and go out to sea, though the lines will decide, of course, that some will, as I'll talk about in a minute. The CDC calls for and requires only what they call simulated voyages. In their framework for conditional sailing, which lays out all the different rules, they say, and I'm going to quote here, simulated voyage means a mock voyage or series of mock voyages designed and implemented insofar as possible to replicate real-world onboard conditions of cruising with measures in place to mitigate the risk of COVID-19. So amongst all that long, complicated definition, note the repeated use of the description mock voyages. So if you do decide to volunteer for one of these, which some lines are already allowing people to do, you should not assume you're signing up for an actual cruise. And my watch out here is check and carefully understand what is actually being proposed line by line as you look to volunteer. So for example, Royal Caribbean, on their Facebook page, where they call for people to express interest in taking part in one of these, they call them, and again I'm going to quote here, simulated trial sailings and not cruises. Now, most of the over 40,000 people already in that group clearly are thinking these will be actual cruises based on the discussions I'm seeing in that group. Now, these simulated trial sailings may not leave the port, and the ship could actually remain at the dock while the lines simulate and run through the various procedures that are required. However, some definitely will set sail for shore. Now, in the CDC document, they have an option for cruise lines to test out excursion protocols using their private island shore excursions. So it's very, very likely that at least some, if not all ships will, of course, set sail for the likes of Half Moon Cay, Great Stirrup Cay, or Perfect Day at Coco Cay. Some, however, could remain docked alongside for several days, something you may want to keep in the back of your mind as you look at this whole area of volunteering. There are a number of restrictions on who will be allowed to take part in these cruises. Now, here's what criteria you need to fulfill to be able to volunteer for one of these tests. Firstly, the CDC requires all volunteer passengers to be at least 18 years old, so no kids and family groups. They did not specify an upper age limit, certainly I think as of yet. Now, secondly, they require all their volunteers to have, and again I'm going to quote this, a written certification from a healthcare provider that the volunteer passenger has no pre-existing medical conditions that would place that individual at high risk for COVID-19 as determined through CDC guidance. So again, a complicated definition, but it is worth noting that the CDC already lists a lot of conditions as high risk in COVID-19 in their guidance to date. These include obesity, cancer, diabetes, COPD, pregnancy, weakened immune system, asthma, and even high blood pressure. They also repeatedly across their guidance have age as a high risk. So we may see age limits become part of the final advice. Thirdly, the volunteers must not be offered participation in return for employment or what the CDC call future reward. So don't expect added future perks and discounts if you volunteer and take part, because that is not allowed. Personally, I also predict that volunteers close to ports running tests, so like Miami, Port Canaveral, Port Everglades, and so on, are going to be those most likely selected for simplicity and ease. Almost certainly with the current travel restrictions and state of the virus, these will be for USA residents only. I want to specifically call out that volunteers will have to wear masks on these tests, as I know this is a huge issue for many cruises. This will definitely put some of you off volunteering. Both the cruise line developed protocols and the CDC document have masks and face coverings required for embarking and disembarking, for use inside the ship at all times other than when seated for dining and drinking, and when not possible to have a 6-foot physical distancing out on deck. So a lot of potential areas for wearing masks. Lines, without a shadow of a doubt, will be enforcing this on these tests because it's a really hot topic for the CDC. There will, of course, be a raft of various other protocols that I've covered in other videos and articles that you'll need to follow, as these, of course, are going to be key to the test on seeing what works and what doesn't work. Now, these tests are not designed to be a vacation. These test voyages are exactly that. They're an opportunity for the lines and the CDC to assess their new health and safety protocols and all the different situations. So don't expect a cruise where you're going to be able to go off and do your own thing all the time. You're going to be required to take part in all sorts of activities and drills. And as you will see, that's going to include a period where you're going to be quarantined in your cabin. Now, according to the CDC, these simulated voyages will have to include test runs for at least 6 different things, which everyone will need to take part in. Number 1, embarkation and disembarkation procedures. That's going to include terminal check-in and all the screening. Now, this will include testing before boarding pierside and another before being able to disembark at the other end of the trial. Both will take much longer than pre-pandemic. In Europe, where cruises were operating with these new protocols have been running, check-ins been taking between 1.5 to 3 hours. 2, onboard activities will of course take place, including using dining and entertainment venues with all the new physical and social distancing measures. It might include things like venues having limits on capacity, possibly booking to attend, served buffet dining, all those kinds of things. 3, evacuation procedures. This will greatly be changed where you'll be testing the new e-muster drill. This is fantastic because you now use in-room video and the cruise line app, but there will of course be a drill simulating having to evacuate an emergency. So that's one drill you'll have to take part in. The 4th thing is a drill covering the transfer of what are going to be identified as symptomatic passengers and crew from their cabins to isolation rooms. The 5th thing is quarantining of all remaining passengers and non-essential crew to their cabins. They don't say yet for how long this quarantine drill will be on these test cruises. The 6th thing is for those that are sailing, testing out the private island shore excursions. There will be a number of COVID-19 tests and screenings, especially as the CDC wants a lot of data to help make the decision on if all these new protocols are actually working. Now, this is going to include, based on the CDC framework, a minimum of 2 tests, which I touched on earlier. 1 before boarding the ship on the pier, and again before being allowed to disembark the ship. You may also have to do 1 as part of a screening before leaving home to join the test cruises. This is mentioned specifically in the document. Now, importantly, these tests will be the laboratory-based PCR swab tests and not the rapid tests that are being spoken about a lot. Now, the reason being the lab tests has much lower scope for false negatives and positives, and they're more able to pick up asymptomatic cases. Now, this is something that's really important. It was highlighted by the Sea Dream outbreak in November. They were just using the Abbott Laboratory fast test, and it didn't pick up asymptomatic passengers. Of course, one additional thing to consider is that the CDC say they will require the cruise ship operator to immediately end the simulated voyage if COVID-19 is detected during the simulation. Now, this is much as we saw happen with the outbreak in Sea Dream in the Caribbean in November. As soon as there's an outbreak, end of the cruise. Now, despite a lot being known about these tests, as I've covered, there are 3 key unknowns that will evolve over the coming weeks as I see it. Firstly, exactly when they will take place line by line. Based on the steps that the lines are going to have to take, these voyages will almost certainly only take place in early 2021. Though some lines are hoping to try and get some in right before the end of the year. This is why, for example, we've seen lines like Carnival cancel all their scheduled cruises to the end of January already. Secondly, in terms of unknowns, is how long the tests will be. At this stage, despite repeated inquiries, the CDC has not publicly said how long they will need to be. So this is something we're still waiting for. Thirdly, what the final numbers, who and how the volunteers will be chosen, and what costs the volunteers will have to incur, like getting to and from the ships. And it's not actually 100% clear that these will be free cruises. At the moment, the lines are starting to let people like you sign up to show interest. The Royal Caribbean site has had over 100,000 people sign up so far. So this is the key watch outs that you need to know that I hope help you decide if you should volunteer for these required test cruises as the opportunity arises. I hope it helped clarify things. If you found this interesting, why not enjoy another of my Tips for Travellers episodes packed full of cruising updates, tips, and advice right now.